person you can know, and every place that you can go, and anything that you can show. You know they're nouns. A noun's a special kind of word. It's any name you ever heard. I find it quite interesting. A noun's a person, place, or thing. Oh, I took a train to another state. The flora and the fauna that I saw were really great. But when I saw some bandits chasing the train, I was wishing I was back home again. I took a train to another state. Well, every person you can know, like a bandit or an engineer, and every place that you can go, like a state or a home, and anything that you can show, like animals and plants or a train. You know they're nouns. You know they're nouns. Oh, Mrs. Jones is a lady on Hudson Street. She sent her dog to bark at my brother and me. We gave her dog a big fat bone, and now he barks at Mrs. Jones. She's a lady who lives on Hudson Street. Well, every person you can know, Mrs. Jones, a lady or a brother, and every place that you can go, like a street or a corner, and anything that you can show, like a dog or a bone. You know they're nouns. You know they're nouns. Oh, I took a ferry to the Statue of Liberty. My best friend was waiting there for me. He took an early ferry. We went for a walk on the island, you know, and in the middle of summer it started to snow, and I took a ferry to the Statue of Liberty. Well, every person you can know, like a friend or the captain of a ship, and every place that you can go, an island or a sea, and anything that you can show, like a statue, a ferry, or snow. You know they're nouns. You know they're nouns. Oh, I put a dime in the drugstore record machine. Oldie Goldie started playing, if you know what I mean. I heard Chubby Checker, he was doing the twist, and the Beatles and the Monkeys, it goes like this. I put a dime in the drugstore record machine. Well, every person you can know, the Beatles and the Monkeys, Chubby Checker, every place that you can go, like a neighborhood or a store, and anything that you can show, like a dime or a record machine. You know they're nouns. A noun's a special kind of word. It's any name you ever heard. I find it quite interesting. A noun's a person, place, or thing. A noun is a person, place, or thing.
So guess what we're going to talk about? There's one and two or three in every crowd, isn't there? Nouns. Remember nouns? You remember the old Schoolhouse Rock videos?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I got a few of those. We'll have fun with them, okay? What's a noun? Well, they're actually missing something.
Idea.
Concepts. Love can be a noun, can it not? It's not a person, place, or thing, but it's a concept. So person, place, or thing, and some concepts we'll see are nouns. So let's see. I think, was there one more video I want to do? So let's take a look at a little bit of English. Remember your English grammar, nouns. It's not going to be hard for you. You remember how nouns are used, right? Person, place, or thing. Nouns perform a function in a sentence. What functions do they perform?
The object that's doing the action or whatever.
Action of the verb. You got the direct object, and you got you get the object doing the subject is doing the action, or no, the action of the verb, and then you got something receiving the action called the object. And then sometimes you have possession, so that shows possession. So in English, we learned there are really three, what they call cases, functions of a noun, and that is the subjective, or functions as a subject, or functions as the object, or functions that show possession, right? For example, subject does the action of the verb, right? He stole my Bible. What is the subject?
He.
Well, how do you know that? Well, it becomes in English because it came before the verb. He stole my Bible. It says who or what did the action. Possession does what? It shows possession. Pretty hard, isn't it? Right? We know this. He stole my possession Bible. Or he stole Tom's Bible. Give Tom's Bible back, somebody. So, it shows possession, right? It's still a noun. Then you have the object. It receives the action of the verb, okay? I'm not going to make you grammar experts here, but I'm bringing back old bad memories, I know. He stole my what? What or whom? The object of the verb that's receiving the action. In a sentence in English, structure, the sentence structure tells us how the noun is forming, or what the purpose of the noun is, right? The structure is very important in English. Without it, we don't understand what the subject is. Without it, we don't know what the object is. In English, we know the subject comes before the verb. John hit the ball. What's the verb? Hit. What's the subject?
John.
How do you know? Came before. That's how you know. That's the only way. What if we change it around and said the ball hit John? It's exact same words, isn't it? What's the subject?
Ball.
Really? Because it came before hit. What's the object? What's receiving the action now? John, right? Same words, but we move it in place in the sentence, and now its function changed. It's the exact same word. Didn't change in its meaning, but the function in the sentence changed. Instead of John hitting the ball hit John. In Greek, it's not quite, well, it's a little more English. In English nouns, we have either singular or plural. You don't have anything else. It's either you guys or you, right? Singular or plural. Everything's that way. Disciples of Christ should be the disciple of Paul. Which one's singular? Which one's plural?
First one was plural. It's plural. I'm saying it's
How do you know? Has an S in it, right? There's a form. We actually have the exact same. Does it change the meaning of the word? Still a disciple. It just makes it plural, right? All we did is actually change the form of the word, but the meaning didn't change. It made it plural when we changed the form of the word. Disciples of Christ should be like the disciple, singular, Paul. What about English words? We add an S or an ES, and sometimes we'll change the form of the word in English, right? The woman visits the women. Proper sentence, right? How many women are involved?
at least three.
At least three, that's right. There's a singular woman who visited a plurality of women. Did the meaning of women or woman change? No, we changed the form of it. In English, sometimes we don't add an S or ES, we actually change the form. What about the child play with children? Same thing. Exact same word, we change the form to make it plural. One more thing about English, and because all these apply in the Greek. In nouns for living beings, they have a natural gender, right? Masculine or feminine. Goran is masculine.
Got that right.
That's right.
No doubt.
Becky is feminine. But this table is neither masculine nor feminine. It's just a table. It's nothing. It's not. In English, masculine or feminine is almost always associated with a natural gender. Okay? And that's it. In Greek, it's not that way. In Greek nouns, let's take the word theos. Anybody know what the word theos means? God. You've heard the word theos before. It means God, right? In theos, there are, the New Testament, 1,317 times used the word theos. It's used in 1,156 verses. Septuagint, that is, you know what the Septuagint is, right? That's the Hebrew translated into Greek, right? Hebrew was a dead language, even to the Jews. And so they translated to Greek so that the Jews would continue to read the Old Testament and know it. The word theos, God, is used 7,795 times in 3,234 verses. But here's the really neat thing. Oh, well, the early church leaders, Justin, Martyr, and those others, they used it in their writing 710 times. Philo, he's the contemporary of Paul, the Jewish philosopher who did a lot of writing about the Jewish history, and really tried to build the Septuagint up and keep the Jews' history alive. He used the word theos 2,397 times. And all those times the word theos is used as a subject, it's used as a direct object, it's used as an indirect object, it's used as a direct address. A direct address, you know what a direct address is? Goran, would you get the door for me? Direct address, right? Talking directly to somebody. Theos. It's used in possessive, God's home, God's house, God's whatever. It's also used feminine. Can you imagine God being used in a feminine way? Yeah, the Greeks used it as a feminine way, right? Goddesses. So it's used in a feminine way. Not necessarily, not to refer to our God, the one true God, but it's used in a feminine way in the New Testament and other ways. Turn to 1 Corinthians 1, verse 21. First Corinthians 1, verse 21, for since in the wisdom of God, the world through wisdom did not know God, it pleased God through the foolishness of the message preached to those, to save those who believe. How many times is the word God used there?
3.
In the Greek, it's used 3 times, and it's spelled differently every single time. We spell it G-O-D. How do we know in the sentence if it uses a subject, a direct object, or possessive?
By its position.
By its position, right? That's not true in the Greek. The position doesn't mean well, there's some meaning, but generally has no meaning or very little meaning. The way we know the difference is we change the form of the word. Just like children, child, disciples, disciple, we change the form. Is it still theos? Is it still God? It's still God, right? Context tell me whether it's talking about the one true God or not, because theos for the one true God is the exact same as theos for a false God. The word's the same. Context tells you the meaning. In Greek, you'll see it written 3 different ways. You're going to see it written as theou, theon, and theos. How do you know which one's the subject, which one's the direct object, and which one's possessive? Well, you have to learn to see the endings and what they mean. It's all the same word. They change just like we do in English. They just do it more often in Greek. In English, we change the ending to make it plural, to make it singular. We change the ending from woman to women to give it a different purpose in the sentence structure. In Greek, that does it a lot more often, is all. So we're not really comfortable with it because we use it on a limited basis, but we see it in English. Let me show you a couple examples. English, like in English, the Greek nouns perform different functions. They perform subject, they perform possessive, object. Same thing as in English. Like in English, Greek nouns are singular, they're plural, no difference. They're, it's either you guys or it's you, or whatever. Like in English, Greek nouns have a gender: masculine, feminine, and neuter. Unlike, well, we'll get to that in a second. Unlike words, though, English, Greek sentences the structure doesn't determine the function of the noun. That's the problem we have that's why you see an interlinear Bible and you read it word for word, it makes no sense to you whatsoever because the subject is at the end of the sentence, the verb's at the beginning, the possession is somewhere else, and the direct, it doesn't make sense to you. So, and to Greek it made perfect sense because the ending of the word, the form of the word, determined how it was used in the sentence. We have to take that and translate it to what we're used to in English. Subject, verb, direct object. And that's all that is. The word faith in Greek is pistis. It's the substance of John's hope. Faith is the substance of John's hope. It's a subject, right? And I don't know why I'm pointing at that screen. John's faith is pisteos. What's the difference between the 2 words? I changed the ending. I didn't change it. That's what it just changed. In the first sentence, faith is the subject. Pistis has this ending, and I know it's the subject. So when I translate it in English, I put it first. John's faith is possessive, then that's pisteos. I changed the ending. It's the exact same word. The word never changed, but its function in the sentence changed. Its meaning didn't change. John has faith, pistin. Well, now I'm using it as the direct object. I changed the ending. I got the same word. I just changed the ending. Don't learn the endings. I'm not teaching the endings. I just want you to understand and see that the same word is used over and over. God, God, God. Theos, theou, theon. Same word. But to know how it's used in a translation, I got to know what the ending is. Pistes, pisteos, pistine, the exact same word. It just has a different ending so I know how it's used in the sentence. In the New Testament Greek, there are these endings that have the subject, that has the possessive, has the indirect object, and has the direct object. For nouns, there's 28,000, almost 29,000 words. For articles, you know, the, there's another almost 20,000. For pronouns, you know, he, she, it, another 16,000. For adjectives, another 7,600, and participles, which we're not going to get into, another 6,600. But here's the thing about them. Once you learn one word, it's the same word, whether it uses a subject, whether it uses the object, or a direct object, indirect object, or however. It's just, now I'm going to change the ending. And what I want to do is show you how it changes. And that's all you need to know is see, oh, I see now that something changed. It's the same word. It changed so that it's used as a subject versus the direct object. Vocative, I'm going to show you, but we're not going to really spend any time on vocative. And the reason is, vocative is the direct address, right? Chris, would you give me a glass of water? I'm thirsty. I directly address Chris. That's a vocative. It's used in less than 1% in the New Testament. You know, I'm going blank. I can't think of it, but I'm sure you can think of many times when Paul directly addressed the brethren. Brethren. That's a direct address. So it's used less than 1%. We're not going to really get into it. Out of all the nominatives, or out of all the different noun usages, 31% functions as a subject. That's the nominative case. 29% function as the direct object. That's the accusative case. 25% functions as the genitive. That's the possessive. And then 15% functions as the indirect object. It's indirectly affecting the verb. So what I want to do is spend some time on the nouns. Pistis, I know is a subject because it has an ending that ends in iota sigma. If I want to see it using a possessive, I'm going to change the ending to epsilon omega sigma. If I want to use it as an indirect object, I'm going to change the ending to an epsilon iota. If I want to see it used as an accusative, receiving the action of the verb, I'll change it to iota new ending. And this is the best way that I've found to help learn it. Anybody remember the parable of the soils? All right, what happens when you toss out a seed, the Word of God? Lands on some soil, and if it lands on the good soil, it does what? Makes root, right? So we get a root, and then the root does what? Germinates, and it gets us what? A stem, and that produces some product of leaves or flower or fruit or whatever, right? You know, when you learn the Greek, that's exactly what you're learning. Let's take, for example, this apple tree. This is going to be a red apple tree. And what it's going to do is it's going to take this word laga and see it ends in that little omega. That's the stem. I got my root, which we're not going to get into here. I got my roots, and I get the stem just like that plant does. And I got a word laga that its stem ends in omega. And I'm going to produce some fruit. And when I produce something like an omega sigma, it's in, just to make it easier, what color is it? Okay, what color is this up here? And that's functioning as the subject. If I want to change the ending to omega upsilon, then it's in the green, and in the green is possession. If I change the ending, remember that little iota subscript that goes underneath? Right? I'm going to make it purple just to make it easy for you. Okay, the omega with the iota subscript, now it's functioning as, here's the nice thing about it, the indirect object. What does the word indirect start with? I. A little subscript iota, indirect object. To me, it makes it easy for me to know. It makes it real quick for me to recognize, oh, that's the indirect object. And if I change it to if I add to that omega and make it omega nu, then it's functioning as the direct object. I get to now learn how it's functioning in the sentence, but what has never changed? It's the same word. It may look differently, but the word is still logos, logu, logo, or logon. Now, that's a red apple tree for one tree. Just one tree. What happens when I want multiple trees? I'm going to use a different set of endings. But the word never changes. That's when it's a, well, I guess I should erase this here. Logos, logu, logo, logon. It's the same word, just used differently in the sentence. That's why you only got to learn 320 words to know 80% of it. But you do got to understand how it changes to know how it's used. Let's move from a masculine word, because logos is masculine. It could never be neutered. It could never be feminine, right? Gorn will always be masculine. He'll never be feminine, I hope, pray. Right? I don't know, maybe so. This word is always masculine, and depending on what ending I have, it tells me how it's used in the sentence, and it tells me it's singular. The word never changed. But if I went from a red apple tree and now I want a green apple tree, do I still have an apple tree? Fruit's different though, isn't it? It's a different apple. It's a different word. Euangelet-o. We'll see what it means in a minute. You're going to have to look it up. Euangelet-o, I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the same word, and notice something that's common to this. See that end of the stem, the omicron? That's what they call these declensions. You'll see that now and then. That's just a pattern. Hey, it's just a pattern. That's all it is. A second declension is a pattern of stem words that typically end in that omicron. And because that pattern, I can know this, 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 and this, and it doesn't change normally. It sometimes does. Look, in euangelet-o, because it's a neuter word, so that I can know that it's not masculine, I have a different set of endings. Omicron nu, omicron upsilon, omega with a subscript, and omicron nu. And so when I go and look at how the word changes, it's the same word. I just change the endings. You see any commonality between these and those at the endings? There's some. What I'm going to do is show you the pattern. You don't need to learn it. Let me just show you the pattern. You'll find it. Now let's say I'm done with apple trees and I feel like an orange. So I want an orange tree. Well, I'm going to call it an orange tree because I'm no longer doing apples. And what I want to do now is I want to look at words that are feminine, but they have a different pattern. Notice this is a second declension, same pattern. It has an omega ending, omega ending. Well, now this ending is no longer omega. It's the eta or the alpha, one of those two, any one of them. That's a feminine word. Doesn't mean it's a female. It means it's classified feminine. All of a sudden I went blank. I can't think of an example, but we'll get to one. So basically, all I did is I'm going to do the same thing. Is I'm going to change the ending. If I have a dash, that means I don't do anything. Agape is the subject, nominative word. I don't change the ending at all. That's just how it is. Basileia doesn't get changed at all when it functions as a subject. But if I want it to function in a possessive, then I'm going to put a sigma at the end of it. I'm going to say basilei. Let me just do the next slide. I'm going to say basileus, or excuse me, basileos, or agapes. If I want it to function as the indirect object, I'm going to keep the same ending with the iota alpha, but I'm going to put a subscript iota under. If I want it to function as the indirect or the direct object, I'm going to put a nu at the end of it. And the word never changed. I changed the form of it, just like I changed plural to singular, singular, plural in English. those kind of things. It's no different than what we see in English. It's just it's more often. But those are singular. That's one red apple tree, one green apple tree, and one orange tree. Now, all I want to do this time is I want to look at an apple orchard. And if I have an orchard of red apples, green apples, and orange orchards, then what doesn't change? That didn't change. I still have my stem, laga, ending in the omicron. It never changed. It still has the same pattern. Second declension is just a pattern. It's still a masculine word, and now it's plural. So for me to know it's plural, I'm going to use a different set of endings. That's all I'm going to do. This word, when I use this ending, I know it's functioning as the nominative. When I use the omega nu, as a genitive, possessive. When I use the omicron iota sigma, dative, which means the indirect object. And accusative is the omega upsilon sigma. And so I get the pattern. Lagoi, lagon, lagois, lagus. Same word. Now it's plural, subject, possessive, indirect object, and direct object. So now I know where to put it in the sentence. So I can speak English. Okay? Now I want to look at my green apple tree. Green apple tree. Red apple tree. Oh, red. How about that? I know it follows this pattern, and this pattern will always look like this when I'm have this omega. And if I want it to be plural and it's neuter, like the table in English is not neuter, but in Greek that would be neuter. I would use this ending versus this ending versus this versus to know how it's used in the sentence. Euangelia, euangelion, euangelios, right? Euangelia. Same word, just possessive. Now, if I want to get to my orange orchard, I'm still feminine in its usage, and I'm following this pattern, and this pattern is defined by the stem ending. And because I know that, I know which endings to use to make it plural as a subject, to make it plural as the direct object, indirect object, and possessive. And so I get agape, agapei, agapeon, agapeon, agapeos, and agapos, basileia, basileion, basileos, and basileos. Basileis versus basileos. One more set, because now we've had red apples and green apples and orange trees, right? But now I'm going to look at pine trees, southern and northern. When I go to a different pattern of nouns, instead of ending in an omicron or an eta or an alpha, it ends in a consonant. Those are a little more difficult words, but they're going to follow a pattern. And you have one pattern that functions both in the masculine and feminine. For singular, it uses this ending, this ending, this ending, and this ending. It's the same word. Karit becomes karis, karitas, kariti, karian. I'll tell you what it means in a minute. We're going to look them up. This is a pine tree. This is a southern pine. I just do this so that you can sort of equate it to something that shows that we're looking at a root to a stem to producing fruit, and that's how the ending changes. But if I want a northern pine, right, I have the same ending. It's a consonant. Now, just because I have a tau, are there other consonants? There are other words with different consonants, but it's going to follow the same pattern, no matter what. Okay? I'm looking at singular. So now if I want to do the exact same thing, and I want to follow, there's phos, photos, photi, photos, or phos. I want to look at it plural. Same word, it didn't change, it's still karit. It just has a different set of endings to tell me it's plural. It still follows a pattern, and that pattern is really defined by that ending. And I get karites, kariton, karitsin, and karitas. That tells me it's plural. In my northern pine, it's got the same ending, phot, and I'll make it phota, photon, and there happens to be no such thing as a dative phot word. So and then there's phota for the accusative. I don't want you don't have to memorize those. I just want you to be aware it changes. But the word doesn't change. The form changes, but the meaning doesn't change. It just tells me how it's used in the sentence. So I just want you to see a pattern. Does the pattern make sense? Okay, now look at the big picture. Let me erase this. This is where it actually, you start to see the pattern. Again, to make it easy, the blue functions as a subject. The green functions as the possessor. The purples as the indirect object. And the accusative as the direct object. And just for reference, I put the vocative, but we don't really look at it. I got my singular up here, I got my plural down here. And I'm going to look at one pattern where the word's in a omicron, or the stem. Another pattern where the stem ends in a alpha or an eta. The same pattern that ends in an omicron, but it's neuter instead of masculine. And then I got these ones over here where they end in a consonant. And I'll have a set of masculine, feminine, and a set of neuter ones. But here's the neat thing. Start looking at some patterns. Look at this dative singular. See the iota subscript, iota subscript, iota subscript, iota subscript, iota, iota. It's real not hard to find a indirect object word because of that iota. And I know it's singular. So I can tell how the word's used. Lago, agape, basileia, euanglia, or krati, or kariti, photi. The endings look very similar, don't they? It's an indirect object. What about in the genitive plural? Lagon, agape, agapon, basileias. That's wrong. That's actually, I gotta fix that. That should be basileon, euanglion, kariton, and photon. All ending in that omega nu. I know it's in the genitive plural. There's some other patterns that you could find if you go further, but basically there's a set of patterns that you get to see, and you see like in the dative plural, pretty much ending in omega. I got this iota sigma, iota sigma, iota sigma. Now I just kind of sigma iota, sigma iota. There are patterns that make it easy for me to recognize how the word's used. I still got to learn what the word means, right? But to see how it's used in a sentence, then I just want to know what the pattern is. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how it changes. I don't expect you to learn it unless you want to go further. But basically, you can see I've got the same word and it never changed. Let me see what I've got next. And so what we want to do next is actually give you a dictionary and look up some of those words. You've got the Greek alphabet up here. You got the Greek alphabet in front of you. And I want to start with one of my favorite New Testament dictionaries. You got it? Got most of it? What'd you get for the first one?
Word.
Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And right? Right? Logos. So when it's used as a subject, it's logos. When you see in the dictionary, it will have also this omega u next to it, and then we'll talk about this another day. That's the article. But this tells me it's pattern. Logu. That's the genitive, the possessor. What you're looking for is logos. It means word. So when I find it in the New Testament, in the beginning was the Word was with God, In both cases, that's used as a subject, logos. And so it's lambda, omicron, gamma, omicron, sigma. What you get for euangelion? Gospel or? Right, we've all heard that before, good news or gospel, right?
Glad tidings.
What'd you say?
Glad tidings.
Glad tidings can be, right? Right, exactly. What you get for agape? Love. Man, these all sound like Christian words to me. What about basileia?
Kingdom.
Kingdom, right.
Realm.
Or realm, right. What about charis? Grace. What about phos?
Light.
Light. What about doulos?
Servant, male servant.
Slave or servant. It is its original meaning was certainly S-L-A-V-E. S-L-A, no wonder I got it wrong. Can't even spell it. I can spell it in Greek, I can't do it in English. Its original meaning, like they talked about in the video we watched, was slave, but because of the connotations over time, it began used more and more as a servant. And so we see the translation oftentimes as servant or even bond servant.
That'd be a good name for a company.
Yeah, doulos would be a good name for a company. I'll think about that. So, what about theos?
Deity.
God, or sometimes it's deity when they don't want to use the word God. What about pneuma?
Spirit or wind.
Spirit or wind, right? Those are the two general translations. Excuse my handwriting, it's S-P-I-R-I-T-S. Okay, and pistis,
Faith.
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 These sound like Christian words to you? All right, so when we look at their little red apple tree, green apple tree, orange tree, and pine tree, all we're doing is looking at patterns so that I could see that I can look up the word and I know how it's used in a sentence, and it helps me find the pattern. And that's all we're really doing. You don't need to know it unless you really want to learn the Greek, but you want to be aware it changed and why it changed, and that's all you want to do. So I know when you look at all that, it may seem confusing and overwhelming. Well, it is. It really is. But the word never changed. It's the same word always. It didn't change its meaning. It only got changed how it got used in the sentence. To know how it gets used in the sentence, that's when you learn the endings. But charis is always grace, whether it's charis or charistos, or it's still grace. Logos is still the word, whether it's logos, lagu, lagon, logi, it's still, or not logi, but whatever. It's still going to be the word. And really, that's all you want to understand at this, where we're at today, is just to see how it changed and look it up. Did you see anything in the dictionary that you had a question about? For example, in most of your dictionaries, and it was brought up, at the end of the word, it had a parentheses and a number. That's generally means how many times it's used in the New Testament in that form. So if it had a number against, and when we get to concordances, you're going to actually have to look up how many times the word is used. So it'd have the word, and at the end of it, it might have, I don't know, 252 times. I forget what it says. And that says that that word is used 250 times in the New Testament. Later on, we're going to look and see how that word is also can be an adjective. It's a different word. It's just now an adjective. Now it's a noun. Subject, direct object, possession. But later on, it can be used as an adjective. Later on, we'll see how it's used as a verb. It's a different word then. It has a different pattern. But today it's subject, or today's noun. So, any questions? Is it kind of fuzzy? Make a little sense? Well, what I hope to do is kind of make it at least visible in terms of how things change, but give you a feel that, oh, I could see that even though there's changes, nothing really changed. It's still the same word. And that's really what, and now you kind of at least a feel that to look it up. What you have in front of you is a sort of a basic dictionary. Tomorrow we're going to use a little more complex one that gives you more information about it, and we'll look up other words. And so we'll just kind of keep looking to a different level and different more. We'll look at adjectives, prepositions, and we'll also look at how some of the different, well, for example, in the preposition to be baptized, in Acts 2:38, for the remission of your sins. Is that because your sins were forgiven, or is that in order for your sins to be given? Well, that's all based on one little word called ace, preposition. So we're going to look at that tomorrow. So why is that confusing to people? And so we'll show you why. And tomorrow we'll look at that along with adjectives, and you'll see the same pattern for everything. It doesn't change. For adjectives, for nouns, for, well, not prepositions, but. So I appreciate you coming tonight. Got you out early, and hopefully you'll be here tomorrow. Hopefully I didn't scare you away. And we'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock.